Are you worried that the best, most impactful years of your life are sitting in your past, or are you ready to discover that God was simply using your career as a training ground for what's next? When you look at that wide open calendar, does it feel like freedom you've earned, or does it feel like an intimidating void that quietly drains your sense of purpose? Welcome back to the Ignite Retirement Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Hennessy, the Retirement Igniter, and I'm incredibly grateful to spend a few minutes of your week walking down this trail with you. If you're a corporate executive, a business owner, a medical professional, or a high achiever who spent 30 or 40 years climbing a professional mountain only to find yourself wondering why the view at the top feels a little empty, you're in the right place. Today, we're hitting the absolute turning point of our entire purpose framework. Up until now, our journeys felt a bit like a descent. We began with pause, learning how to interrupt the frantic, exhausting pace of your primary working years. And then we stepped into uncover, peeling back the layers of marketplace identity to look at your buried gifts. And last week, we dug into the reflect phase, executing a clinical asset inventory of your past wins to separate your temporary corporate title from your permanent God-given talents. That first phase of the trail required you to climb down, and you had to hand back the keys to the office, turn in the corporate laptop, and watch your name disappear from the company directory. For a high performer, that feels like a massive descent. It feels like you're walking away from high altitude territory where you mattered and you're heading down into the lowlands. But today we reach the crossroads. We're entering the pinpoint phase. And I need to correct a misconception right now at the start of this episode. Too many high achievers assume that when they descend from their mountain career, they're destined to live out the rest of their lives at sea level. They think retirement is a flat, passive plain of endless leisure, golf carts, manicured lawns, RVs. Hear me clearly. Pinpoint is not a flat plain. It's the base of a brand new mountain standing right in front of you. It's the exact location where your path stops heading downward and starts climbing upward again. And today we're going to crest that first ridge together, because when you stand on the ridge of Pinpoint, a breathtaking view of even greater heights comes into view. When you stand on this new ridge, and before you grab those hiking sticks and charge blindly up the trail, you need to execute the next critical discipline in our framework. You need to observe. As a professional retirement coach, I've spent thousands of hours watching high achievers navigate this exact transition. From this vantage point, looking across the landscape of modern retirement, you can see the tracks of all those who have walked this trail ahead of you. And if you look closely, you'll see that the field splits into two distinct paths. Down in the valleys, you'll observe people who have retired miserably. These are women and men who were titans of industry, brilliant educators, master clinicians, and yet because they didn't have a forward-facing compass, they slipped quietly into that nostalgia trap. They treat their past achievements like a museum display case. They sit in their recliners, they flip through their scrapbooks and old corporate battles and wish for the good old days. They've allowed their lives to drift into passive consumption, isolation, psychological rigidity. They're physically alive, but spiritually they've checked out. They've made the fatal mistake of confusing the conclusion of their occupation with the expiration of their purpose. But if you lift your eyes a little higher on the horizon, you're going to observe a second group. These are the individuals who have retired magnificently. They're sharp, vibrant, energized, deeply impactful. They're not looking back on their past career with grief. They're using the wisdom, the capital, and the maturity they forged in the marketplace to build something completely new. They're serving on nonprofit boards, mentoring young leaders, launching kingdom initiatives, and pouring their lives into the next generation. They don't have job titles anymore, but they have more authority, they have more joy, and they have more significance than they ever did in a corporate boardroom. We're not looking at the two groups to judge them. We're observing them as a clinical audit. We're mapping the trail. We note exactly what worked for the successful climbers, the intentional, the community-driven people, the ones with clear vision, and we take careful note of the design flaws and lifestyle mistakes that caused others to slide into stagnation. So whether you enter the observe phase willingly or not, you can make a firm, conscious determination that you'll refuse to repeat the mistakes of the miserable. Once you've observed the landscape and mapped out the pitfalls, the fog begins to clear from your trail. Suddenly, you aren't just looking at a chaotic void of free time, you're looking at a magnificent mountain range of future opportunities. And this is where the remaining peaks of the purpose model come into view. You see the peak of uncovering God's design with a completely fresh perspective. You begin to realize that God did not spend 40 years forging your leadership capacity, your operational genius, or your pastoral heart just so you could park it in a garage. Your career wasn't an end in itself, it was a high intensity training ground. The specific company you worked for, that was just a cardboard box that held your gifts for a season. You left that box behind, but you kept the contents. And now, from this new ridge, you can see exactly where those raw, refined materials are desperately needed in the world around you. Second, you can see the peak of surrounding yourself. And as you look around the steep trails ahead, you realize that a fundamental law of the mountain cannot be avoided. You don't make the climb alone. The corporate network that used to provide your daily socialization is gone. And if you stay isolated, you're going to drift down into that miserable valley. To climb higher, you have to intentionally anchor yourself to a community of like-minded high achievers who are headed in the exact same upward direction. You need people to challenge you, to hold you accountable, to refuse to let you settle for a comfortable, passive existence. And finally, you need to see the highest peak on the horizon, elevating your expectations. This is where you break agreement with the cultural myth of retirement. You stop viewing the season as a wind down and you start viewing it as a wind up. You choose to believe that your final chapters will be your most significant chapters. You elevate your expectations because you know that a life aligned with the permanent kingdom calling is a life that remains sharp and vibrant and useful until your very last breath. I need to issue a very direct coaching warning right now because here's the turning point where a lot of performers lock up. High achievers hate being clumsy beginners. You're used to the person with all the answers, the leader who executes with flawless precision. When you stand at the base of this new mountain and you look up to that next assignment, you might not see the whole trail clearly. You might experience what I call strategic ambiguity. And because you can't see the final destination with absolute certainty, your instinct may be to retreat. You want to slide back down into the safety of sea level stagnation because it's comfortable and it's safe and it's familiar. Don't run back down the mountain. Ambiguity is the enemy of ignition, and clarity doesn't come from sitting in a chair and thinking. Clarity comes from movement. You don't need a 10-year master plan to start climbing today. You just need to pinpoint the next right assignment that God's placing directly in your path. You need to just take one. If you're standing at the base of this new peak right now and the trail looks incredibly foggy, you don't have to navigate it blindly. You don't have to go it alone. You just need the right map. You need the right team. And here are 2 action steps for this week to clear the fog and start your climb. On the Substack page, download the Messy Middle Guide. And this is the exact step-by-step framework I designed to help high achievers like you audit their routine, break out of that stagnation loop, and pinpoint their next major move with absolute precision. Secondly, join the team. If you're listening to this audio on a web browser and a podcast app on your screen, hit the pause button right now and subscribe directly to our Substack digital community. Pull your eyes away from the rearview mirror. Stop looking at your past career as a finished chapter to grieve and start observing the magnificent trail that God is opening up in front of you today. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep your eyes looking toward God, guard your calendar, and join me next Tuesday as we continue this climb.